of the Middle Way. Nagarjuna's Madhyamika. Translation and commentary by J. L. Garfield. Part 2, the text and commentary. Chapter 25, Examination of Nirvana. This chapter continues the study of the nature of what are often thought of as ultimate realities and that of their relation to the conventional world. It follows quite naturally on the preceding chapter, which considered the relation between emptiness and the conventional world. For insight into emptiness is, from the standpoint of Madhyamika philosophy, an important precondition for entry into Nirvana. And just as the ultimate truth is related to the conventional as an understanding of the way things really are as opposed to the way they appear to be, Nirvana is related to samsara as a state of awareness of things as they are as opposed to a state of awareness of things as they appear to be. But given the results of Chapter 24, and the surprising identification in entity of the conventional with the ultimate and the doctrine of the emptiness of emptiness, one might well wonder about the status of Nirvana. Is it no different from samsara? If it is, how, and how is it related to samsara? If not, why pursue it, or better, why aren't we already there? Is Nirvana empty? If not, how does it escape the Madhyamika dialectic? If it is, can it really be different from samsara?
Nagarjuna begins the examination with a challenge from the reificationist, raised by the previous chapter. 1. If all this is empty, then there is no arising or passing away. By the relinquishing or ceasing of what does one wish Nirvana to arise? Nirvana is defined as a state one achieves when delusion and grasping cease, and when one relinquishes samsara and its entities. But if there is neither self, nor object, nor delusion, nor grasping, who relinquishes what, and in what manner? Moreover, if there is no arising or passing away from the ultimate point of view, how can Nirvana arise or samsara pass away? Nagarjuna replies, using the same dialectical strategy deployed in the previous chapter. 2. If all this is non-empty, then there is no arising or passing away. By the relinquishing or ceasing of what does one wish Nirvana to arise? Nirvana would be precluded not by the emptiness of samsara, but rather by its inherent existence. For then, it could not pass away. Nor could an inherently grasping grasper relinquish grasping, or an inherently existent delusion be alleviated. The achievement of Nirvana requires dependence, impermanence, and the possibility of change, all of which are grounded in emptiness.
3. Unrelinquished, unattained, unannihilated, not permanent, unarisen, unceased. This is how Nirvana is described. It is important that these predicates are all negative in character, and that they are all expressed, both in Sanskrit and in the Tibetan translation, with explicitly negative particles, skt, a tib, medpa. The point is that no ascription of any predicate to Nirvana, for Nagarjuna, can be literally true. For such a predication would purport to be an assertion that Nirvana is an ultimately existent phenomenon with a determinate property, and there are no ultimately existent phenomena, not even Nirvana. Because Nirvana can only be spoken of by contrasting it in some sense with samsara, and because there is no conventionally existent perceptible entity that could serve as a referent for the term, there is the terrible temptation when speaking of Nirvana to think that, to the extent that one is saying anything true of it in any sense, one is literally asserting an ultimate truth about an inherently existent thing or state. One forgets that once one transcends the bounds of convention, there is no possibility of assertion. The discussion in XXV 4 is framed by the tetralemma that would follow from considering Nirvana to be something independent about which something could be said, or as a proper subject for a theory, or as a genuine alternative to samsara from which it is inherently different. If it were so, it would have to either be existent, non-existent, both, or neither. Note that here Nagarjuna uses the terms existent / non-existent in both their adjectival and nominal forms, tib, dingos / dingosman / dingospa / dingosmed, skt, bhava / bhavo / abhava / abhavo, deliberately calling attention to their correlation. I have generally translated the Tibetan dingospa as entity throughout this text. But for the purposes of this discussion, in order to highlight the structure of the text, I switch in the next few verses to existent. Nagarjuna will now argue that none of these alternatives is possible.
4. Nirvana is not existent. It would then have the characteristics of age and death. There is no existent entity without age and death. Nirvana is negatively characterized as release from samsara and the constant flux, aging, death, and rebirth it comprises. But that means that since all entities have these characteristics, Nirvana cannot be thought of as an existent entity. And here we must be very careful. The point isn't that Nirvana can't be thought of as inherently existent. For inherently existent entities, if there were such things, would not have these characteristics. In this discussion, Nagarjuna is rejecting the notion that Nirvana can be thought of as existent in any sense at all, even as a conventional entity. That is why we must be so careful in our discourse, very careful indeed, for, as we shall see in a moment, neither do we want to say that Nirvana is non-existent. But moreover, Nagarjuna will want in another sense to identify Nirvana and samsara, see XXV, below, and there is clearly a sense in which we can say that samsaric phenomena exist and a sense in which we can say that they do not. Again, see the discussion of the positive tetralemma in 18:8 above. The point here is that though things seen from the standpoint of samsara and from the standpoint of nirvana are not different in entity, from the standpoint of samsara they can be characterized and appear as entities. But from the standpoint of nirvana, no characterization is possible, since that involves the dualities and dichotomies introduced by language, including the positing of entities and characteristics, as well as their contraries and complements. These have only conventional and nominal existence, and no existence at all from the standpoint of nirvana. See also the discussion of XXV, below. In a sense, this discussion can be seen as a useful commentary on Chapter 9 of the Vimalakirtinardisa Sutra and, in particular, on the dramatic concluding remarks by Manjusri and non-remarks by Vimalakirti on the subject of non-duality and insight into emptiness. Manjusri indicates that the distinction between the conventional and ultimate is itself dualistic and hence merely conventional. To realize it is hence to enter into non-dual awareness of emptiness. He then asks Vimalakirti to comment on non-duality. Vimalakirti remains silent.
5. If nirvana were existent, nirvana would be compounded. A non-compounded existent does not exist anywhere. All empirical phenomena are compounded. But being compounded involves phenomena in the round of samsara. For since the recognition of compounds as unitary phenomena demands conventions of aggregation, to be compounded is, ipso facto, to have a merely conventional existence. And it is the treatment of merely conventional, nominally existent phenomena as inherently existent entities that generates samsara. That is because from the standpoint of Buddhist soteriological theory, the foundation of suffering, the basic condition of samsara is craving, and the foundation of craving is the root.